take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. The facts of life. There's a time you gotta go and show you grow, and now you know about the facts of life.
You just say it.
Well, we're back. We are back on 30 Minutes or Less. And on this episode, we'll be talking about the Facts of Life episode, Starstruck. I'm back again with Rusty and Poe.
Hi.
Hi.
A lot of energy in the room. I'm loving it.
Well, I want to start off by just saying, Ed, you picked this episode for us to watch.
Yes, I did.
What made you pick this episode?
It stinks of Ed.
It does stink of it.
I did a quick. I wanted to do a Facts of Life episode. I wanted to do the original season, the first season when it had like a different cast and everything. But the more I read about it, more people were talking about Starstruck being a great piece of entertainment, which I agree with.
What did they say about it that made you latch on?
Mostly when people talk about this episode, they talk about Tootie's freak out, which is one of the more famous sitcom moments and one of the defining moments of this series for sure.
It opened the door for Jesse Spano's. I'm so excited.
It did, yeah. The thing I read about it said that it put it to shame. I don't know if we're going to say it was as intense. What I read said it was way more intense.
Well, Mrs. Garrett always had the answer. And this time, she looked in the camera and had no idea what to do.
Well, we're getting way ahead of ourselves.
We are.
That was a great piece of acting.
That was great. No, we're gonna get very deep into that. But before we do, we need to just talk about the show in general. Because, Poe, did you know that The Facts of Life was originally not a ratings winner?
Oh,
I could see that.
Came out. That first season struggled on Friday nights.
Because this is a bunch of girls.
Yeah, they debuted it summer 79.
Oh, yeah.
I was just a baby. The son of Sam was stalking the streets. I believe he was in prison. But then when they brought the show back after retooling it, they brought it on to Wednesdays at 9:30. Exploded.
At night?
At night, yes.
Oh, that's so weird.
It does feel like it could have been AM. It seems like every scene in this episode, except for one, takes place like 9 a.m. lighting.
I think I may have been too young to watch this show when it was originally aired. I think I watched the reruns.
Yes.
I remember.
But you might remember in its 7th season, you might remember the new episodes. It moved to Saturdays.
Oh, okay.
Where it sacrificed itself for Golden Girls. It ended up going down on Saturdays, but it like opened the door for Golden Girls. So
don't mess with the Golden
like
Girls.
Saving Private Ryan. Blair was dying on the beach. She was like, "Earn this" to Sophia, who was like, "I can't even hear you." Okay.
Who was on the cast in season 1 that they got rid of?
Well, that's a great question. You're not going to believe it.
Some of them that were there. Wasn't Mindy Cohn there?
Yeah.
Natalie?
Yeah.
She was in the first season.
Yeah, that's not the question. Hold on.
Oh, what's the question?
Poe was asking who got cut from the original cast, and I was about to blow her mind.
Oh, who got cut? Oh, okay.
And then Molly Ringwald.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That I knew.
That's right.
Yes. Playing a character named Molly.
Oh, right. She was very young also. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember now.
And do you remember also this was a spin-off of the show Different Strokes?
Oh, because of Mrs.
Yes.
Garrett.
Yes. Originally, Kimberly was going to the school where this happened.
Oh, she couldn't stop being such a junkie whore.
Wow.
I like that. I like that.
I meant the real life woman too.
Rusty, you're going to have to think about cutting that out.
I don't know.
But there was never, after the pilot, there was never any mention of Kimberly being a student at Eastland again. They dropped that.
Makes sense. Okay.
A little connection between this show and Growing Pains.
Oh.
Are you?
During the course of the show, it was revealed that Mrs. Garrett and Beverly Ann hailed from Appleton, Wisconsin. Now, Joanna Kearns is married to prominent Los Angeles architect Mark Appleton.
Wow. Kill yourself.
You really did your research of most uninteresting facts.
I'm going to blow your mind with this one. You do know who wrote the theme song, right?
Who?
Alan Thicke.
No.
Was part of the team.
Wow.
That's not bad.
George Clooney was fired from the show in its 8th season after a Star is Torn episode, but I couldn't figure out if anything happened on that episode in particular or not.
Oh, interesting.
You didn't bother to call George up to find out why?
Not on a Friday. Do you know this show is known as the Apple Tree in Italy?
What?
That makes sense.
Oh, why?
Well,
I got to give props where props are due. And according to Entertainment Weekly, there was once an anti-gay joke in the script where one of the male characters was slammed for being effeminate. But Charlotte Rae vetoed the joke, saying we do not make fun of people's sexuality on this show. She made a stand.
Nice.
And
okay.
So in an interview, all right. So let's start getting into this episode a little bit here.
Okay.
I'll tell you one thing. In an interview with Dish Nation, Kim Fields says she was close friends with Janet Jackson when she was a kid, and one day her and Michael and Janet went to Disney World together, and it was the best day of her life. She said.
Still.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So the episode of question, Starstruck, directed by Assad Kalada.
Yeah, notice that.
Now, Assad was born in Egypt. Not very, a bit unusual for a sitcom director.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Yale, studied drama there. Didn't start directing sitcoms until he was 36, directing an episode of Rhoda. But
wow.
I'll tell you this, he directed every show you've ever heard of. Who's the Boss, Night Court, Family Ties, Benson, Day by Day. He directed 77 episodes of this and 117 of Who's the Boss.
Whoa.
And he directed as recently as The Office.
Wow.
And at the wrap party, he said, "It was my dream to finally work on a funny show." He didn't really say that, but I thought anyway.
That's amazing if that was true. Oh,
the opening theme of this, what do you think of the opening song?
I don't love it. Oh,
I'm on episode of Crossfire here. Each person make your case.
Man, I don't know. I like it because of nostalgic reasons, really.
I have to agree. This opening theme is more indelible to my childhood than my parents. Now, Rusty, let's hear your case against.
Even as a child, I always thought it was a bit corny. Plus, I didn't really love the facts of life the way you did, so didn't really.
I do hate the part of the song that goes, "Time you gotta grow and show you know how you go." It's just a little too much all at once.
The time you gotta go and show you grow, and now you know about.
You know what? I never even knew the words. I was listening when I watched it. I was like, "Oh, that's the words for that." I don't know if I was just my kid ears were like, "I'm just not even."
And you were like, "If I had listened closer, my life could have been easier up to this point."
Yeah, lots of things to learn with it. I know when they were playing the end credits. What do they call those?
End credits, I guess.
Okay,
yeah.
And then I heard another verse. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Way more nuggets of wisdom in that one.
All right, so let's just get right into this wild episode. We open. Tootie is having a meeting of the Jermaine Jackson fan club. First question: who is Jermaine Jackson?
Now, my second question is, how many stars do you think they tried to reach out to before they settled on Jermaine Jackson?
Listen, he was like legit. I definitely at least know one song.
Let's Get Serious, the song that he sang.
I don't even know that one.
That's like their biggest song. That's
really? Okay. That was one of my questions. If when they all sang the "Let's Get Serious" song, which was incredibly annoying, if that was based on a real song.
Like even listening to them sing it, I was like, they're singing this wrong, and I don't even know the song.
That was actually a pretty big song. It was, I think, either Stevie Wonder wrote it or did most of the tracking on that.
Oh,
so it sounds like a Stevie Wonder song. So that's why I think it's big.
Yeah, I could see that.
The same way Michael Jackson did most of the Rockwell song.
So Tootie is obsessed with Jermaine Jackson.
Yeah,
fanatic.
You ever been obsessed with someone to this level?
Yeah, but it was a Brazilian band of and they were like all their songs were joke songs, and they died tragically in a jet plane accident.
Before or after your obsession?
Kind
during?
of before, like during.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow, that's great.
So it amped
So you
it up.
experienced it.
So I actually made like scrapbooks and stuff, and I'd never done that before in my life.
Wow.
So it like fueled my obsession with them.
How old were you when you were obsessed?
I'm like way too old to be doing this. I think I was like 19 or something. And also because it's Brazil, they published all the graphic photos of their chopped up bodies in the Brazilian jungle, and like pieces of their like torsos and shit. And I was like, do I keep this photo? Do I put it in the scrapbook? Yes. What about you? Who are you obsessed with? Rusty, because you said yes.
Well, the obvious one was Kurt Cobain. That was my big obsession.
I couldn't get that. I was like, why are people so sad?
I forgot, Rusty. I forgot you cosplayed as Kurt Cobain for a few years in high school.
Wow.
I really did. I had the look down pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good look.
It was a pretty good look.
Yeah.
But I mean, Kurt Cobain was like, especially at that age, when you're like 13 or 14, like you're coming of age. So it really speaks to you. It really helped develop who I became. Not a great thing though, in retrospect. But
what about you?
Well, mine died like so many years before I was born. Sir William Shakespeare. No, I'm obsessed with tons of people all the time.
Shakespeare was a woman. Just kidding.
Wow. I could imagine that kind of devotion. I don't know. No segue. They pledged allegiance to Jermaine Jackson in this fan club. Was that annoying, that moment?
God, it just went on for too long.
It really does. It really does. And Tootie's also made a paper mache sculpture of Jermaine's face,
which they don't reveal. Just
doesn't make any
reveal
sense. Doesn't make any sense. They put it down on the table, like facing away from the camera, and the audience like reacts. I'm like, what are you reacting to? It's completely invisible.
Why are the other members of this fan club so loyal to Tootie? Like Tootie's just dictating everything, and they're just eating it up.
I guess, yeah. There's some weird like power game there.
There's a lot happening in this episode.
I'll say right now, I don't understand what the point of it was.
I think it was more about showing respect to celebrities.
Or
I'll tell you this: if I ever teach a class at the Kennedy School of Government, this will be in there because it's about how people become radicalized. It's about what happens when dictators have too much power, and Mrs. Garrett is kind of like the common person who doesn't know how to react.
Well, let's break it down, and maybe we can figure it out. Clearly, Ed, you're insane, but
listen. So, just one other thing I have to say about this opening scene. Joe comes in. Now, Joe is the engine of the B story here. And Joe really wants Tootie to make 24 scarves for this fair that's coming up. 24 scarves. No one else seems like their chore is quite on that level.
I know.
No. And Joe is she's just like what a lot of people in the cast in this episode seem coked up, as I do. And Joe and Tootie are both so intense. They start at 10 and they go to like 45.
Yeah, Joe was really angry before any setup about the scarves even happened. So you're like, why? What?
Yeah.
You have no idea what these scarves mean or represent.
It's classic bad writing in that I am like, it's like I'm looking at Stalin versus Hitler. I'm like, who do I root for?
Well, what's Joe's endgame? She's way too invested in this girl getting her books and money for that school.
Well, because
which is the point of the fair. We didn't say that part, but
So the point of the fair is to get this girl into their school because she was that girl a year ago because she needed money to stay in that school.
Very moving moment. It was like I was suddenly Gene O'Neill play.
They also dropped that way later in the episode when you're like, oh,
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I care.
Well, we got to take this sequentially. So in the very next scene, what was we going to say?
I'll save it with Joe. But the thing about the fan club, do you remember when like all the other girls want to make plans with Tootie. They're like, "Oh, can you study or can you hang out?" And she's just like, "No, I'm so busy, but you can help me put these Jermaine Jackson posters away."
Mm-hmm.
And they're so eager to help her out. It's like, really, that's the highlight of your day, to put some posters away?
I actually am like so lonely that is appealing.
No, yeah, there is some weird sort of hierarchy there of like Tootie is some boss person. I don't, yeah, like she. Well, I guess she got a fan letter, right? She's the president of the Eastland chapter, and so she got a letter that's obviously like a
Rubber
letter
stamped.
that everybody gets, yeah. And so maybe they kind of like she became popular because of that, and then everyone kisses the popular girl's ass.
Yeah, well, it starts with this. The letter is the first thing that
it's
puts her
it's
on
poorly
the path
written,
of destruction.
Yeah.
But a lot of things are going to feed her ego as this episode goes on, and she will crush those who oppose it.
I have a crazy thing to say, though.
Yes.
How many other episodes do you think Tootie ever mentioned Jermaine Jackson in leading up to this episode?
Literally zero. It's almost surreal how they don't address previous episodes in sitcoms from the 80s.
Oh, wait. So I had one other thought about Tootie.
Yeah.
Now, her role as president, she specifically states how busy she is being the president of the fan club. How much time do you think you would have to invest in being a president of a fan club during a day? If
you're going to do a good job or a shitty job, sounds like you're going to do a shitty job.
How much time would you invest?
Well, president of Selena's fan club has invested 30 to life.
That's true.
I mean, you could be fanning over them for hours at a time. You could be writing letters, clearly working on clay busts. Like
that's true, and that's time consuming.
Very reminiscent of Peep Show when Jez builds the bust of Elena. If you remember that.
No, I don't.
Russian girl. Anyway.
Okay.
It's not a Peep Show podcast. So Blair's working on those mobiles. When was the last time you heard those referenced since like 1920? I can't believe those were still
making the solar system in elementary school.
Wow.
Man, when Natalie and Mrs. Garrett came in and the whole gang was together, that was like the Avengers, right?
Terry is there. Joe's cousin with CP. Is it Joe's cousin? Whose cousin is she? Blair's cousin?
She's somebody's cousin.
Blair's cousin. I don't know. It's it's
the
guessing.
only good comedic relief in that episode, I thought.
As my notes here says, Terry crushes it on the way out.
Yeah.
Wait, are you calling her Jerry or Terry?
Terry.
It's Jerry, though. So you don't even know her name. Neither of you know her name, but you're loving her jokes.
I'm actually looking at the notes. I have both Terry and Jerry.
Well, sorry,
Jerry Jewell is her real name, and she played Jerry Tyler. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird because I think she played someone named Jewel on Deadwood.
Yes.
Wait, her last name is Jewel?
Yeah. And she was, I believe you're right with playing Jewel on Deadwood.
They're all talking about fans, how big of a fan can you be? And Jerry says that she once had a fan stalked her from city to city, laughing at every show. And then she finally said, "Listen, Mom." And then the scene ends. And
I knew that joke.
Big
though.
laugh.
You didn't know that was
no, you knew that was coming.
Yeah. Surprising how little people know what's coming next on shows.
It's true. Mrs. Garrett didn't know what hit her. She was rolling in the aisles.
I mean, yeah, great.
Wait, the thing I don't understand though, like when Natalie comes in and Natalie's talking about being a super fan, is that ever touched upon in previous episodes? Was Natalie a super fan of someone?
You could just believe that she
wasn't. She? I felt like her character was always like a romantic. She's the writer. I feel like they have made her fawn over people. I think that doesn't seem too far fetched.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't seem.
But it also was always like Tootie was under Natalie's wing.
Yeah.
This series seems like another case of like a bunch of kids that have nothing in common that are forced to be friends. It seems like Natalie would never hang out with Joe, and Joe would never hang out with Blair, and Blair would never hang out with Tootie, but yet there they all are, the main kids.
That's the whole point.
Called drama.
Yeah.
Speaking of drama, Joe is pissed that Mrs. Garrett hasn't frosted her fruit bars. And now Mrs. Garrett says, I will frost no fruit before it's time. I don't even know what was going on there. Was that a reference to something?
Mrs. Garrett seems so confused in this episode.
She did.
She's like, why am I here? What am I doing? I'll just look at the camera.
She seemed like she was like hitting the nitrous in between cakes. This was a chilling moment in this episode.
Okay.
Chilling moment. Did you notice that Natalie goes to pick up the paper mache sculpture of Jermaine and pulls the nose off, just like Michael's nose would later be off. That is some scary stuff.
Well, she calls the bus lifelike. Did that look anything like Jermaine Jackson or even a human being?
Well, I don't even understand how these are the kind of questions that no one cares about. But how did the sculpture get that destroyed when she touched it? Suddenly it became like a cake. That's not what a paper mache sculpture would do.
Would that ever harden when she was carrying into the box to bring to Jermaine? Did that actually harden up?
Well, a lot happens to this sculpture. So no spoilers yet. Tootie, Rusty, you were asking about how much time you would devote to a fan club. Tootie has devoted all of her time. She can't do her schoolwork because she's so devoted to all these Jermaine tasks. And she presents it so matter-of-factly that it does become chilling.
Yeah. What kind of power does Mrs. Garrett have to enforce, like, for the kids to study or not do something?
I've always found it's best to rule through fear.
What was Mrs. Garrett's role? Was she the cook?
I mean, who are these people? Are they
the grandmother? She was watched over them, made sure they went, took care of themselves, went to bed, did their homework. She was like their mom.
Wait, so I don't understand. This was a private school?
Yeah.
Because Blair seems so upper class, and yet like Natalie seems like middle class to lower class. And Joe is obviously so. Why would Blair be living with these girls if she is definitely
Rusty sent me a text Blair with all the skull measurements of the facts of life test. No, I don't know why they were all in this. No, I think Joe got a scholarship.
Yeah, that Joe makes sense, but like Blair is like high society. What's she doing there?
Well, because Blair, if it's like a fancy school,
fits in.
Yeah,
but why would she be hanging out with such riffraff?
That's where she lives. It's like her dorm. It's like her house.
Yeah, it seems like she would be hanging out with other like elite.
I'm rejecting this premise. you would not be a fan of this pitch if it came in?
No, I don't know. I was never that big into Facts of Life. So trying to wrap my head around this.
This was a spinoff of Different Strokes, as we said.
I love Different Strokes, yeah.
Facts of Life had like 8 spinoffs that never went. Backdoor pilots for random characters they tried to make into their own show. It just never happened.
Oh, yeah. Didn't they try to give Joe a show? Okay, so anyway,
Natalie comes in from answering the phone. The publicity man for Jermaine Jackson is on the line. Now, it takes about 2 minutes for this message to then get Tootie on the phone. That's how stalled everything is in these sitcoms, where she's like burning time. Rusty, what are you saying?
But Tootie thinks that Natalie's lying, and then Natalie says like something about her face that she makes.
Yeah.
What was that about?
It was a very strange delivery. Natalie is like, you know how I look when I'm lying? And then she makes like a crazy face. And then Tootie is like, oh, I got to get the phone now.
Yeah.
And the guy says, thanks for being Jermaine's #1 fan. And he invites her to the concert. Now, this is our final moment of this act going into the commercial break. Tootie comes in and is like, I told you all. I told you. Like, what's that poem? Ozymandias? Like, she's like at the height of her megalomania, and then the audience applauds and it goes to commercial. And I was like,
that was when it went to commercial.
I was like, the audience, we're supposed to like her in this moment?
Well, so initially Tootie admits to Joe that she didn't make any of the scarves. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I'll make it up to you. I'll do any job that you want me to do. And Joe's like, all right, fine. And then all of a sudden she gets this call and she's like, fuck you guys. Which, to be fair, as I was watching this and I was like, yeah, that's what you do. Yeah, go to the concert.
Well, yeah.
Fuck this.
I mean, it's a once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah. What? Free tickets? You got a phone call?
So you're saying Joe should have understood?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Or given like a better conflict, you know.
Now,
Yeah.
Ed, you're notorious for buying tickets at concerts, but either going for 5 minutes and leaving or not going at all. So what would you have done?
I think the answer is obvious. I would have gone for 5 minutes and left. Been back to that fair probably before it started, tragically. All right, so now we come back from the commercial break, and this is the scene, the two scenes, which are, I think, why this episode won a Peabody. That's not true. But these two scenes are powerful. Tootie is telling Mrs. Garrett, she's fucking breathless. She's telling her that she's going to the concert, and Jermaine invited her, and Mrs. Garrett is like slowly telling her that she's not going to be able to go. It's like seeing two slow moving trains about to collide.
Well, Tootie wasn't even listening, but I that was actually probably the best moment in the show.
Oh yeah, because once Tootie realizes what's happening, she fucking explodes.
She would have ripped her head right off.
If it was anime, like there'd be fire behind her, like.
I was wondering like how it was going to play out because Mrs. Garrett was just like, hey, listen, you made a commitment. We can't go, like, you know, being really calm and rational. And Tootie was like, fuck you. No way. I'm going. And then she starts to have like a panic attack.
Oh, yeah.
Right? She's
Yeah.
hyperventilating.
Tootie basically reaches the first stage of werewolf transformation and stays there for like the rest of the scene. Whereas Mrs. Garrett goes from like concern to fear.
Tootie, I said you're not going to the concert tonight.
I don't care what you say. I am going.
It ends with Tootie crying in her arms and Mrs. Garrett like looking like at the audience for help. She's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. And she's just saying, we'll go.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, Mrs. Garrett, this is our second powerful scene. Mrs. Garrett is telling the rest of the girls that she's going with Tootie to the concert and they're going to miss the fair. Joe
they were pissed.
Can't believe it. Joe can't.
Well, Natalie was pissed too. Natalie was like, why are you letting her go?
And Mrs. Garrett looks shell-shocked during this conversation. And she even says, that wasn't our Tootie. Tootie's become someone else. She's become a fanatic.
Well, Blair says the fanatic line.
Yes.
And they have to explain what fanaticism is. I think is that the message of this episode?
Is that the message?
Yeah. No, the message is about fanaticism. That's why it's going to be in my ISIS class. And not really credible though, because I don't think Tootie is isolated enough to be radicalized. I am isolated enough to be radicalized. She had like 5 of her best friends right there.
Yeah.
So jealous.
She didn't even get dark enough, in my opinion. She just seemed like a teenage girl who really wanted to go to a concert.
Yeah.
And was
that's where it starts.
Yeah, but it didn't go anywhere else. That was the height of her insanity. And then she was like, learned her lesson super quick. Or like she didn't even get crazier. Well, Mrs. Garrett even brought up, which I thought was hilarious, the footage of the Beatles.
Oh, yeah. So before we leave this scene, it ends with Mrs. Garrett talking about how she saw the Beatles. And she talks about it the way you would talk about seeing like footage of 9/11. And it's like pushing in on her slowly as she's like, it scared me what I saw in those eyes of the fanatics. And like, it's, you know, it felt like we could have got to commercial here as well. And it's like, so the end of that scene is like, we should be afraid of the Beatles. What was the point of that?
So it goes to commercial there. No,
it doesn't go to commercial there. So then in the next scene, Tootie is trying to get into the backstage area. Now we've all been there trying to get into that backstage, hang with the rock stars.
So then they go to the concert and the concert's over and they're like in the, whatever.
The backstage area.
And Tootie seems totally normal, like a normal person who just enjoyed a concert. Well, not like a fanatic, not a crazy stalker.
She has that huge gift though with her. So she's sitting through the whole concert with it.
And she's screaming Jermaine and she's trying to force her way through a door.
I love that they're passing it off as mayhem backstage, but it's really like 8 kids just shouting at the door. Those paper thin doors that they had.
But why isn't the door locked?
It was great direction by Assad Kalada when there's a little bit of a distraction and Tootie's able to wiggle through. That was great. That was great action directing. But then, speaking of action directing, when she gets into the green room or whatever it is, she screams, Jermaine. We see Jermaine. We get one of those weird sitcom zooms we've seen once in a while.
It looked like the scene. It looked like the scene in Planet of the Apes when they finally revealed that it's the apes doing the hunting of the humans.
Oh,
it's like that zoom in.
Had a very similar zoom, like almost like a silent, still, like the guy's like, yeah, wow, very good comparison.
But it's like we zoom 3 feet away.
Yes, we zoom. We don't zoom that far, just on Jermaine. But then the bodyguard gets Tootie in a headlock,
which is insane.
That was a little wild. It lasted a little longer than you thought it was going to.
Traumatizing.
And then another guy gets in front of Jermaine. He's like, I'm going to take a bullet for Jermaine. He's like,
this has to be after the whole Ronald Reagan assassination thing, right?
Oh,
I think so.
They made a Reagan joke at one point, and she compares herself to Ronald Reagan.
Right.
That was the law, though, in sitcoms in the 80s. You had to mention Reagan. But Jermaine lets her stay. Classic Jermaine.
He has such a bulge. I was like, when he sits down, his pants are going to split.
It's all the way to the left.
The full body blue sequin suit. Tight.
Very strange performance by Jermaine here. I have a theory about it.
He's never acted before. That's the bottom line.
The whole family's fucking insane. How about that for a theory?
That's a good theory. And Rusty, you said he had never acted before?
I know that's not true because he's actually in Voyage of the Rock Aliens, the movie I keep plugging on our other show.
Yeah, but I think that's post this, isn't it?
It is posted in '86. Yeah.
Wow, it's your favorite movie, and I know more about it than you do.
I was just trying to pass that in.
Here's my Jermaine Jackson theory, and this is really only for aficionados of the episode, but he only says one line per shot. Like, it seems like they must have been feeding him his lines, like he didn't memorize them. Because like there'll never be any interaction. It's always just like one shot, and then he says like a line, like really in his weird deadpan way.
Like so many quaaludes, right?
A lot of dead
like,
air.
I think that she's like, well, she's quickly realizing that it's not all it's cracked up to be a star.
Yeah. Well, this whole moment. Let's talk about this moment.
The funniest thing is like when she identifies herself, and he's just like, "Your name is Tootie." He seems so displeased by that.
Or you just didn't know how to even read that. You were like, "What is his reaction?"
I thought he was going to be like, "Oh, I know you," but then it just didn't go anywhere.
But it's kind of a weird scene because they, you could see something more extreme happening, like on a different sitcom, like she saw him taking drugs or something. But instead, they kind of have an awkward conversation, and then he has to continue with the bureaucracy of being a rock star. Mm-hmm. And she kind of leaves, not to get afraid of ourselves, but really disillusioned. But you're like, nothing really happened. You guys just didn't know what to say to each other.
Well, it's such a sitcom conversation about him being a celebrity and wanting his privacy and to be respected, and her being completely confused by that.
He does say, she says, what's a good day to you? And he says, a walk, sometime alone, a day all to myself.
Yeah.
I agree. I just wish every day wasn't like that.
Did you write that on your computer?
No, I did not.
But she also finds out that a lot of the celebrity world is fake. Like the thing with the dog. She asks him about how his dog is doing, and he says he's allergic to dogs, which kind of makes her a little miffed by that. She's like, "Oh, my world is crumbling."
Yeah.
And then she finds out about the letter. What
about the letter? I forgot about that. Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, he doesn't really get involved in that stuff, the publicity side. He's focusing on his music. So he really doesn't know who the fuck any of his fans are.
Right. And then she sees the publicity man from earlier on the phone with someone from the Philadelphia chapter, giving her free tickets because she's Jermaine's #1 fan. And she was like, fuck this. This is all a lie.
Yeah.
Why is
all bullshit?
Why is the publicist making those calls after the concert? You think that would be like part of his day job? Like doing it.
He's like, I gotta wait for this room to be as crowded as possible.
Not even a cordless phone.
The coming attractions for this episode. Do you think when they like promoted as Jermaine Jackson like stars on the next episode of Facts of Life, do you think people were tuning in based on that?
Probably. Yeah, you would think, right? Like guest star Jermaine Jackson.
Yeah.
But if it was like Michael Jackson, everyone would tune into that. But Jermaine Jackson, like how many more fans were they getting for that one?
I mean, I think it's people who are already watching anyway.
I really hope Jermaine Jackson's not listening to this right now. Not like what he hears.
Have either of you ever watched a show that you normally wouldn't watch, but there was a star on it that you tuned in for?
Ooh.
Can you recall?
I feel like the answer is yes.
Yeah. I think when Bam Bam Bigelow was on The Wire, I don't know. That's
Horrible.
a celebrity and show I could think of.
Horrible. Probably. I mean, I think I watched Friends because I had to, because it was like one of the only things that was on. But I remember I was like really excited when Brad Pitt was on it. I was like, Brad Pitt, some Friends. So, but I feel like I was watching it anyway. So, I don't know. You had no answer. Saturday Night Live, I guess.
That doesn't count. That doesn't count.
It doesn't.
It's my great shame. The only time I can remember being like, oh, I gotta watch SNL because the guest star was when Steven Seagal hosted. I mean, that was back 1990 or
I
whatever.
can tell you a quick Steven Seagal anecdote. My mom saw him on the street. She was walking our friend's dog, and it was an Akita, and he was walking by, and he was like, "Hey, is that an Akita?" She was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Great dog."
Wait.
And then she was like, yeah. My husband's a fan of yours." She like didn't know what to say, and he goes, "You're not a fan of mine?" And she was like, "Oh, okay, bye, Steven Seagal." So
I am
like,
not going to tell your mom to go
little bit
buy
weird.
a time machine, but it seems like she missed an opportunity because he said Akita, his martial arts is Aikido.
I was just about to say that.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
Help!
So Tootie leaves the dressing room feeling really down on herself for being all obsessed. And Mrs. Garrett asked how everything went. And she said he said thank you for the gift. But I want to know, that's where the episode ends?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We never find out if they'd raised enough money for that fundraiser for that girl.
Plot device. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. That's like what the writers were saying when they're like, well, what about the fair? Hey, fuck, the fair didn't matter. Fuck you.
There's so much time devoted to it. Wait, what about that black girl joke they had to add in?
Oh, yeah. There's one point where Mrs. Garrett is trying to get in the dressing room, and she goes, "Has anyone seen a young black girl?" And then everyone goes silent, and it cuts to all these young black girls who are like, "What?" But wasn't it weird? They're all like noticeably older than Tootie.
Oh, wait. You know what I want to ask you since you're a super fan, Ed?
Yeah. Okay.
The concert was in New York, right? In New York City?
Yeah.
Where's the school located? Is it in New York?
It's 45 minutes away from New York City. That's actually,
okay.
I didn't know that.
Really?
Yeah, I saw that in the Wikipedia.
Wow, I didn't know that all of these shows took place 45 minutes out of town. And I used to like just romanticize these lifestyles. Like, oh, I wish, like Growing Pains especially, I was like, I wish I could live in a house like that and with the thing, with the shim. I had no idea it was in Long Island. And she was like, we're going to the city.
Could have been your life. It was there for the taking.
I mean,
Well, the interesting thing.
I would have not cared as much if it was so close. I would have been like, oh, one day I can have that if I want it.
Well, the interesting thing is Neil Marlins created Growing Pains, and he was from Long Island. So he also created Wonder Years, and he wanted that to take place in Huntington.
Okay. It's kind of stepping on the next episode. Already got some material about that.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it again. People might not listen to this episode and listen to that.
Wow. No, you're going to edit this out.
Anyway. Well, what do we want to? What's our final Jerry Springer final thought on this?
I hated it, but I enjoyed parts of it.
I also hated it because it's just something about like the era it's from. It's kind of hard to look at, but the scene where Tootie loses it and then Mrs. Garrett being so shaken made it worth it for me.
I also hated it. And I just felt very uncomfortable that Mrs. Garrett didn't have an answer and that she was so terrified. I did like, my favorite part of it was Tootie kind of realizing the fallacy of stardom, and like the moment of realization she had in the dressing room was kind of the most interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And then that she got so mature by the time she walked out of that room that she was like, it's fine. He said, thank you for my gift. The end. We'll never speak of it again. You know? And it was like, wow, okay. I like that.
They needed like they needed like the Wonder Years like voiceover explaining like adolescence and her growing up that day.
Or like, there's a fine line between being a fan and a stalker.
You know what I think I hated? I didn't like Facts of Life that much growing up. And I think none of the characters I could cling on to. I always needed a character in the show to either have a crush on or to like just idolize. And the Facts of Life cast didn't really do it for me.
Well, what about Mackenzie Aston, who...
Well, you should have picked an episode with him because that might have been a different episode we're doing.
Was he Mrs. Garrett's son?
Oh, yeah, definitely not his son. Her son. Her
Sorry.
son died in World War II or something.
Takes a lot to get 'em right. When you're learning the